You are listening to the Fly the W670 podcast, episode 92 of season number 3, Crawly's 2024 offseason wish list part 2. Don't forget to listen, down the review, and most importantly, subscribe to the podcast, follow on all the socials, Fly the W670 on Twitter, Instagram, and Fly the W on Facebook, or email us at flythew670@gmail.com. All right, Crawly, last week we looked at which starting pitchers, closers, catchers that you wanted to sign. This week we'll look at the right fielders, first baseman, and maybe a DH that could positively impact our Cubs in 2025.
Now I'm going to go a little bit into fantasy land. All right. I'm going to go into fantasy land because, I included right fielders and a little bit of DH there in case Cody Bellinger does get traded. Do I think it'll happen? No, but rather better safe than sorry. I thought I would make this list in case something happens. Number 3 on this list, Dustin, Anthony Santander. I love that guy. We saw him when the Cubs played the Orioles in Baltimore. He's a guy, to me, I don't know if he's going to have the exact same year that he had last year. But to hit 40 home runs, 44 home runs, only 30 years old. Ooh, boy, that's something, right? He's a switch hitter, right? He has 476 slug. He strikes out a lot. He does play a little bit of first. Decent arm. He's not I think Seiya Suzuki's actually a better right fielder. But I would, 44 home runs has me drooling a little bit, Dustin.
Right. Again, if that's the type of guy that you're putting, if he's your fourth outfielder type, right? Somebody's going to have an injury, right? Somebody's going to miss some time in the outfield, and that would definitely be.
I'm thinking if somehow this is in my imaginary fantasy land that Bellinger does get traded.
This is with a Bellinger trade. Okay.
This is with Bellinger out. Like you're not going to sign this guy because he's projected to make 5 years, $105 million. He's not a fourth outfielder at that.
No, he's not a fourth outfielder type. Or is the possibility like if you were to trade Nico, right, and then you move Bush to second, and then you had an opening at first. Could he play some first, maybe? Or
yeah, a little bit. But there's other first basemen that I would rather turn to. That I wouldn't want him playing first. That wouldn't be in a pinch. Yes, fine.
You want Pete Alonso? I get it.
Like a Patrick Wisdom type thing. Where
you want Pete Alonso
games, I'm okay.
All right.
Hey, we'll get there, right? Now you mentioned Mason Miller to the A's, and that was a tough one to leave off the list. But the A's have somebody that, to me, is interesting, and that is Brent Rooker. Brent Rooker is a guy that, because he plays for the Oakland A's, he plays for the West Coast, he plays for a crappy team, that he doesn't get a lot of buzz. But if let's say you did get rid of Bellinger, let's say you move Seiya back into right, Brent Rooker, I think, would be a DH. Dustin, how about this? 39 home runs, 112 RBIs, 927 OPS in 145 games. That do anything for you?
Yeah.
69 home runs, and he's playing for the A's.
And he's playing for the A's, right. Now, is that because the pressure's not there, right?
I just think he's a really good ball player on a really bad team in a really bad ballpark. He's arbitration eligible. So if you get him, Dustin, you get 3 years of contractual control. So it's not going to cost you a lot of money.
Right.
Okay? But what it will cost you a lot of is prospects. This is a deal that if you're going to make this, I'm guessing at least 2 top 10 Cubs prospects.
Oof. Well, again, if we're talking to the A's and we're talking about prospects, I'm more Mason Miller, right? If that's to me, and that's where I'm going. That's where I'm going with prospects to the Athletics.
And now, Dustin, my number one choice here, if right field is open. Sorry, I don't care what anyone
says. I don't know why that drum roll is making me laugh tonight, Crawly, but that's it. That drum roll is making me laugh.
One with Juan Soto. I don't care if it's not a possibility. It should be a possibility. We are the Cubs. We have the second most revenue that is generated by any other team in baseball. Don't tell me we can't get Juan Soto. This is a guy, I know that they want to stay within a certain price range. Figure it out. How were the Dodgers able to figure out $800 million for Shohei Ohtani? This guy is as surefire Hall of Famer as you can get. You saw what happened when you passed on Ohtani. You saw what happened when you passed on Machado. You saw what happened when you passed on Bryce Harper. What can you tell me about out of those three guys? You just saw Ohtani holding up a World Series trophy. You've seen Machado and Bryce Harper constantly in the postseason. That's what having those type of guys does. They get you to the postseason. I'm sorry. I'm not going to sit there and play poor here. I want to see. I'm not drinking $14 beers because it's enjoyable. A $14 Bud Light. Get me Juan Soto and act like a big league club. Act like a major market club. All right. Now, sorry, I had to get that off my chest.
Take a break. Take a break. Little breather.
Now, Dustin, you're asking about first baseman, second baseman. If Nico does get traded, spot opens up for a second baseman. We talked, the Cubs can move Michael Busch to second, and there are people that you could put at first, but I kind of got something that I'm kind of interested in, and I don't know if it'll work, but I it's worth a shot here. Ryan McMahon is the guy that took Chris Bryant's job for the Rockies. He's a third baseman. The Rockies did not make him available at the trade deadline, but they're going nowhere fast, the Rockies. And so if you're going to trade here, right? McMahon has 3 years, $44 million left on the 6-year, $70 million contract, 29 years old. He's hit 20 home runs in each of his past five full seasons. So it may take, again, it may not be, it's hard to give up those prospects when we've been hyping them up and excited about them. But Ryan McMahon isn't a prospect. He's a guy that's proven it at the major league level. You could take him at third base. And what about moving Isaac Paredes to second?
That's assuming Paredes has played second.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, okay. Yeah. I mean, yeah, okay. But don't the Cubs have like a really good prospect playing third base right now? That was just like the MVP, right? I mean,
right. But
if you're gonna move Paredes, let's put it, Crawly, at some point, okay? And again, I like the lists. I do. But come on. At some point, one of these guys has to come up. We saw it last year. Okay, worked out pretty good. I think one more's got to come up. And then you could actually go out and buy some of these people that you're talking about. But it can't be musical chairs. If Shaw can play third base, then move his ass up here. I guess trade Nico Horner while he's at his lowest trade value that he's ever going to be at. And go ahead and move Paredes. I mean,
I could see Shaw playing second. And so that those are all possibilities, Dustin. There has to be some sort of combination of trades and free agent signings. There has to be some combination.
I guess, and the other part of this list is like, okay, you've done a great job. We're covering, we're showing holes or possibilities at every position except shortstop. But how many of these, like two of these positions gets filled in the way that you're potentially saying?
I think what we're going to do is we're going to make a tier system like we did last year. We had our tiers last year, and you'd like a 1 and a 3, obviously, and I remember, I think Shota was a 3 on our list, and it turned out to be a really good signing. And he played better. If I would have known what kind of season he had, I would have moved him up to a tier 2. No. So, I mean, we have to have some sort of combination of things. And again, understand that we're working, we know that Tom Ricketts doesn't want to go over the luxury tax. So, I mean, I wish they would, but I don't think that's going to happen. So that's kind of why I'm looking at that. Again, you're going to have to find some sort of mix and match combination of free agents and potentially trades. And so one guy that is a free agent that obviously has been talked about to death, the polar bear, Pete Alonso, is my number 2, Dustin. My number 2.
Surprised only 2. We're going to find out who number 1 is, I guess.
We will, along with the drum roll. But, you're talking 5 years, $130 million for Pete Alonso is what is predicted. He is the one that hit that home run off of Devin Williams. I mean, just unbelievable. But he didn't have a great 2024 season, but he's a guy that has power, and every time he plays the Cubs, he kills the Cubs. You just wonder what he could do with a full season of playing at Wrigley Field. But Dustin, I think, he's 30. He hit 34 home runs last season, which again, absolutely blows away anything the Cubs did. But, a lot of strikeouts. That's what power guys do. But I would be, it'd be fun to kind of see what Pete Alonso would do at Wrigley Field.
Well, I would love to see it. I mean, I'm all in on Pete Alonso. I am.
All right. Now you want to know my number one here. Here we go.
I do. I want to know.
How about Vladimir Guerrero Jr. in a trade with the Blue Jays?
All right.
First baseman, 25 years old. You're going to have to give up a lot. And again, he's going to be a free agent in the not too distant future here. But you're talking about a guy that, to me, 30 home runs, 44 RBIs, 44 doubles, 30 home runs, 103 RBIs. I wonder what he would be like, again, similar to Pete Alonso, but can you imagine him playing at Wrigley? And I think one thing, Dustin, and maybe I'm just kind of getting a little bit down just because we were disappointed last year. I feel like this team's lacking personality.
Oh, for sure. No
I think
doubt.
that this is kind of a dull team, and it's not.
There's a couple good guys with the media. Nico's great with the media. Ian Happ's great with the media. PCA might be the closest thing to somebody with a pulse, honestly.
Right, exactly. And I think that if you got PCA and then you have Vladimir Guerrero Jr. with the hair and hitting those home runs, I think that would be an absolutely fun pick, for the Cubs at first base. And then again, sign him later. But I still think his best years are yet to come. And I would love to see him play at Wrigley. I think it would be a lot of fun. And again, you're talking about trying to get some home runs, trying to get more power. It will cost you eventually, but it's not going to cost you next year.
So now, when you say prospects, Crawly, how what are we talking? Like 2 of the top 10?
You're going to go 2 top 10 probably on Vladimir Guerrero Jr.
So, and what would you be willing to do? Like 1 pitching, 1 fielding, 1 field, type thing?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, you got some outfielders. The Cubs have a good farm system. I think, like you said,
at some point, you either got to, use them or move them or lose them, right? Something's got to get.
Absolutely. And you're 100% right on that. And so that's kind of where I am, is like, okay, and we could have this conversation a different day, but who would the untouchables be if you're talking about trading? But you can't. I talk to people and they're going to be like, well, Owen Casey and Cade Horton and this guy and this guy and this guy and Matt Shaw.
Well, everybody's going to have 2, right? And nobody's going to have the same 2. Everybody's going to have 2 guys that are like the can't miss. Now, there might be some overlap, but I bet nobody's list is exactly the same. If you said, okay, 2 guys that can't be moved, go. I bet if you did 10 people that cover the Cubs, you'd get 10 different answers.
Yeah, I would.
Unless it was maybe Shaw or Owen Casey, like for everybody. But I think you'd have to. I think the other part of the way to phrase the question be 1 bat, 1 arm.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the top 4 is what everyone looks at: Shaw, Casey, Horton, and Ballesteros. I think that losing any one of those guys would be hard, but you would probably, if you're going to make some sort of trade, lose some combination of 2 out of those 4.
This is the Fly the W670 podcast, season 3, episode 92, Crawly's Cubs 2024-25 offseason wish list, part 2. Don't forget to listen, download, review, subscribe to the Fly the W podcast. Of course, we'd love a 5-star review. You can email us at flythew670@gmail.com. And don't forget, you can watch us on the 670 The Score YouTube page. In this segment, Crawly's talking to Bryan Smith of Northside Bound to discuss the Cubs' exciting new hire, pitching expert Tyler Zombro. Not Zambrano, but Zombro. And to talk about which minor league prospects the Cubs may add to the 40-man roster to protect them from the Rule 5 draft.
Joining me now on the Fly the W podcast, we're happy to have on our old friend Bryan Smith, formerly of Bleacher Nation, and now doing some work over at Northside Bound. Bryan, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on again.
Always a pleasure. Today was kind of looking like just a quiet day, nothing really happening in the whole baseball world. And then who else but Jeff Passan kind of drops the bomb. The Cubs are hiring Tyler Zombro as a special assistant. Zombro's 30 years old, become one of baseball's preeminent pitching trainers at Tread Athletics, and he'll work in all areas of Cubs organization to help improve the performance of the Cubs arms. So obviously, this is breaking news today. But the thing that really kind of impressed me was just the reaction from a lot of smart baseball minds, including yourself, Bryan. Can you do me a favor and tell our listeners a little bit, first off, about Tyler Zombro? Who is he? Where does he come from? What organization was he with?
Yeah, so Tyler was a minor league pitcher not too long ago. I mean, he's really young. He's 30 years old. I believe will turn 31 this offseason. Was a promising young pitcher, and then kind of had a freak accident, I think, sort of lead to the end of his career. He got hit on the head by a comebacker. And I think, whether it was that directly or just general, the stalling of the career, maybe that was going to happen naturally. He ended up transitioning to coaching a few years ago and has sort of quickly become known as one of the leading minds in the industry. He's been working at a place called Tread Athletics. I think a lot of people around baseball have heard of Driveline. Tread is one of probably the three similarly sized, like biggest workout gyms and development gyms in the country. It's based on the East Coast, where Driveline historically has been based on the West Coast.
So again, when you think about all of, everything that he's known for, what makes this such a good get for the Cubs, and what do you see his role being in the future?
Yeah, I think the Cubs benefited a ton when they had Craig Breslow as their director of pitching a few years ago. I think Craig really turned the organization around. You saw, whether it was somebody like Justin Steele, them help Justin find the best version of himself, or just generally the Cubs went from being a bottom 5 organization in the average stuff of their minor league pitchers to literally being second in 1 year under Craig's leadership. Craig eventually, of course, goes to Boston to be the president there. And the Cubs, I think, did a pretty good job of just sort of internally replacing that last year. But I think they did want a new voice, an extra voice to be in those conversations. And it's great to get that done at the beginning of the offseason, because Tyler will be able to have a say in the pitchers that the Cubs bring in, whether it's sort of like the big name that leads the rotation, or even like those sort of minor league depth signings that fill AAA, but sort of inevitably help out the Cubs when injuries happen in, May, June, July.
Yeah. And the one thing that kind of just got me to reach out to you is I saw you on Blue Sky, and it was, you said, that someone that sort of said, hey, this is a massive get, one of the smartest people in the sport. Yeah. And over and over and over again. And I think, when you talk about Craig Breslow, and look at all the good things he's doing for Boston already, but it just, you lose a little bit of a brain drain. But I like the fact that the Cubs saw this guy and jumped out and made sure that he was part of the system. And like you said, kind of, it's not saying he's going to replace Craig Breslow, but a guy that can sit there and have conversations about, the direction and the arms. And it seems to me like from things that I've seen that he just seems to be a really good teacher as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Cole Ragans, who was, the breakout star for the Kansas City Royals in their rotation this year, credits Tyler a lot for his evolution as a pitcher. I know the Cubs sort of saw it internally last year with Hunter Biggie. Hunter Biggie worked out at Tread last winter, I believe, and took a huge step forward in his own stuff development, both with his fastball reaching, the highest end velocity it had yet, back up to sort of 100 miles per hour, as well as his breaking ball being the best it ever had. So I think that helped. I think Ben Brown has some history of working out of Tread. I think even Jameson Taillon's worked there before. So he's going to have some familiarity in there, which was really encouraging to me. I don't even know if this was necessarily out in the public space, but I know Tyler was talking to other organizations too. There were other teams interested in him, and the Cubs won the bidding for him. And so the Cubs put a priority that I think they, were willing to sort of open up the pocketbook, as well as give him, a promise of a certain level of the organization and having a legitimate say at the top end of baseball decision making.
Now, who do you think, because it's interesting, because I keep seeing that the Cubs are cutting this, cutting that, as far as scouting and all this stuff. Who do you think was really kind of pushing this as far as like, look, this is a guy that we got to get, and we got whatever it takes, we got to get him.
Yeah, I mean, a few years ago, even when Jed started and he hired Justin Stone and Craig Breslow as the directors of hitting and pitching, I think they really liked the idea that these directors would have this sort of floating role, that it's not just, they don't just work with the minor leaguers. Like when the draft comes, they involve those people and they have them look at first round pick options and second round pick options. When free agency happens, Jameson Taillon talked about the pitch that Craig Breslow made him on how they could improve him if he came to the Cubs organization. So those directors are also involved at that level. I basically think, Tyler's role doesn't seem to be called, director or anything, but I think it's the same type of thing we're going to be seeing, where he's going to be involved in those prominent discussions all throughout the organization, whether sometimes that has to mean a tough conversation with a struggling pitcher, or whether it's, flying out to Arizona to work with the guys on the developmental list who are in the lowest rungs of the ladder. Like there's going to be a lot of diversity to that role, but I think Jed and Carter like the fact that there's sort of one voice that they're going to put at the top of the pitching ladder, sort of right next to Tommy Hotovy.
All I got to say is, as long as we can get, maybe this is like a makeup from Jed for giving up Hunter Biggie in that Christopher Morel trade. And that hasn't turned out too good for the Cubs, has it?
No, I mean, that one might hurt this year. Hunter might have a good season, but, the Cubs also, I think in that deal, like someone like Daniel Palencia could have been in that deal instead of Hunter Biggie. So if Daniel Palencia has a great season, then, I think the Cubs will end up feeling like they made the right choice on which reliever was outgoing. So you got to give something to get something. You're just hoping that you give the right guys and more importantly, I guess, keep the right guys.
And I mean, are there any pitchers right now where you're just like, oh, I think, pitcher X would really benefit right now from working with Tyler, right?
Yeah, I mean, so one of the things I know that Tyler's written about before is this pitch that's kind of getting popularity in Major League Baseball called the death ball. Death ball is essentially, it's a curveball that is thrown faster than a normal curveball. And, the majority of Major League curveballs will break to a pitcher's glove side. If you imagine looking at from the center field camera, right-handed pitcher, a curveball is going to break to the left. There are a few pitchers, Ben Brown being one of them, who throw a curveball and it actually breaks to the arm side. It's a pretty rare thing. And if you can get that pitch thrown at velocity, they're finding that it has real success. So Ben is going to be somebody who's sort of already ready-made into throwing a pitch that Tyler really likes. Jack Neely, who the Cubs acquired for Mark Leiter Jr., I think is another guy that's going to sort of pop on Tyler's sort of bias list himself. I would not be surprised if Jack won an opening day spot in the Cubs bullpen, as sort of a result of having Tyler around. And then we'll see in free agency. I mean, the one thing I think they might have some confidence in is if you see a pitcher who sort of hasn't totally had a breaking ball that totally fits yet, there might be some confidence that Tyler, as well as the staff that's already in place, can sort of help get that pitch over the top.
And that's exciting. And Daniel Palencia is a name that really interests people. And the kid can throw heat. It's I don't know. It should be fun. Now, speaking of Palencia and some of the younger guys, we're getting really close to that Rule 5 draft as far as trying to protect guys. And I know that you and Greg and everybody over at Northside Bound had what was that the other night? You guys were talking about your draft as far as guys that you would want to protect from the Rule 5 draft, correct?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, it's mostly going to be known as sort of an Owen Casey celebration day to tomorrow, Tuesday, the 19th. Owen is a lock to get protected from the Rule 5 draft. He, of course, the Cubs wouldn't list. So he'll sort of be the headline name, but I would not be surprised. Yeah. If the Cubs maybe protect, maybe two other players, maybe just one, but.
Well, let's kind of talk, remind our listeners what the Rule 5 draft is and what's happening tomorrow.
Yeah, the Rule 5 draft happens on the last day of the winter meetings every year. And it's basically a draft that allows teams to take players that are not on other teams' 40-man rosters that have been in their organizations for about 4 seasons. The idea of it is that it forces teams to develop with some level of quickness in order to sort of benefit the players. And, the Cubs have made picks before. I remember right after the World Series, they drafted Caleb Smith, who they didn't end up keeping, but Caleb went on to actually have some success. Hector Rondon was a Rule 5 pick once upon a time. The Cubs have lost players in that draft. Generally speaking, it's one of those fringe events that doesn't necessarily impact the organization, but we're bored. It's the early offseason. Nothing's happening. And I promise you, this is what they're talking about inside the Cubs offices. So we might as well have fun and talk about it too.
Right. And so when you talk about Owen Casey, I mean, like all those years ago, the Yu Darvish trade was 2021. So we're, all of a sudden here, Owen is the guy that everyone's been kind of waiting for. And so this just means you're one step closer to the big leagues, right?
Yeah. Once you're on the 40-man roster, it's really easy. You really just can get called up without having to release another player. It's really easy to sort of fill in when an injury happens. I think what it most does for Owen is if Ian Happ gets hurt in spring training, Seiya Suzuki gets hurt, Cody Bellinger, like Owen is going to be one of the, sort of two names that would be most likely to come up because it'll be so easy since he'll already be on that 40-man.
Now, like obviously they're going to have a fourth outfielder of some type, a guy that's going to be sitting on the bench most days. It might as well be Mike Tauchman again. But if someone was to get injured, and I know that like Cody Bellinger, he has a long injury history. He's a guy that's been hurt a lot.
Yeah.
Do you think that you just sit there and you say, okay, you know what? We're gonna live with the ups and downs of a rookie and just let Owen Casey take it? I mean, I couldn't imagine having him sit on the bench. I just don't think that there's any point to it.
Exactly. I think the path for him will be play in Iowa every day. And then if an injury happens where we can get you up for like a 10-game stretch where you're going to start 7 or 8 of those days, well, that's worth it. Like that exposure, go through those struggles that Pete Crow Armstrong did when he first was there, but begin to learn the ropes. And then every once in a while, like, you have those rookies that come up and just have those special first weeks and can really sort of create an energy and buzz in the city that's really impactful too. And I think giving way for those is actually important for an organization. And that's going to be the fun thing I think about the 2025 Cubs is their top prospects are going to provide this layer of depth that is really going to help when injuries happen. Like you're not going to just be getting like Joe Schmo who kind of, stinks, who's in AAA, who's a 31-year-old veteran that, is unlikely to move the needle much. Like you're going to have a guy that we're really excited is getting called up. We're going to have Matt Shaw. We're going to have Moises Ballesteros, and we're definitely going to have Owen Casey in 2025.
Was there now, again, I know you guys were making your picks and whatnot. Who do you feel other than Owen Casey? Is there one or two players you think are most likely to maybe get a 40-man roster spot?
Yeah, I'll say the most likely in my mind is probably this guy named Ben Cowles, another guy they acquired for Mark Leiter Jr. over the summer. Mostly, I think, because they just acquired him. He was injured at the time they acquired him. They knew that this deadline was coming up for him. So I could definitely see him getting acquired, particularly assuming that they're going to probably release Nick Madrigal at the end of this week. Now, the one that I'm more excited about and I'm really hopeful gets protected, a name I can give people to sort of look out for is named Arian Rodriguez. He's a soon-to-be 23-year-old right-handed pitcher, was in South Bend a lot last year, and a guy that didn't quite break out last year, but like showed enough thing. He was sort of skirting along the line of breaking out. If he had struck out maybe 5% more batters, he would be so much more well-known. He's a big kid, 6'3", but really filled out, big, broad shoulders, throws up to 97. If he learns a breaking ball and maybe Tyler Zombro is the guy to teach it to him, then he could be a real sort of top here. And the Cubs protect him because it would hurt me very much if like someone like the Chicago White Sox picked him in the Rule 5 draft.
Oh man. Okay. Well, you've given us something to look forward to. So tomorrow is the day we find out, who's protected and who's not. And it's a good problem to have all this young talent. I keep thinking that the future looks bright and we've been waiting for it. And now you kind of see it. Like AAA is going to be stacked for the Cubs. And then, I love going to Principal Park and visiting our buddy Alex Cohen and stuff like that. But I mean, there may have to be multiple trips to Iowa this year.
Totally. And honestly, when I look back at the 2024 Cubs, like in Chicago, my favorite parts of the season were that one stretch of time where Ben Brown and Porter Hodge came and really stabilized that pitching staff. And like they had kind of got the Cubs through that really bad May stretch and helped them have a little more success in early June. And then certainly that August stretch where Pete Crow Armstrong and Miguel Amaya were like, they were the offensive spark plugs for that really good baseball they played for a couple of weeks. So, we did start to see what a good farm system, like how it can impact the Chicago Cubs. Unfortunately, it wasn't stretched out long enough. It was, those guys had more like good sort of sneak peeks at what they could be versus great full seasons. But it continues to build optimism in my mind that they're headed in the right path with these young, talented guys.
Now, I know this last weekend was the 9th anniversary of Kris Bryant winning the Rookie of the Year award.
Yeah.
And I remember when he got called up, the second I heard, went on the secondary market, grabbed some tickets and took the day off. And I'll never forget.
It was a disappointing day.
It was a disappointing day. It was a big game. James Shields was shut Kris Bryant down, but I was there. Mike Bryant was there, and Scott. I got a picture with Scott Boras that day. I literally was like, "Mr. Boras, can I get a photo?" He's like, "You want to? You know who I am?" I'm like, "Oh, I know." And so if you think Owen Casey gets called up, does Brian Smith play hooky from work and head down to Wrigley Field?
Absolutely. You can. I'll be the one person that recognizes Crawly and takes a picture with him instead of Scott Boras.
Oh man! Well, if you do it, I say we meet up, we have a drink, and it'll be a lot of fun. Brian, tell our listeners where they can follow all your information on the socials.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, this is the fun week where we're all starting to explore a new social media app and see if it's worthwhile. So, why don't you come try Blue Sky with us? I'm over there at my new handle is Cub Smith on that app, CUBSMITH. So that's the easiest place to find me for now. I'll probably write a couple things this off season, but you'll be able to see it from there.
Well, I appreciate you jumping on, Brian. It's always good talking to you, man. And like I said, I'm excited to see what the future holds for these young kids.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
This is season 3, episode 92 of the Fly the W670 podcast, Crawly's Cubs 2024-2025 off-season wish list part 2. Don't forget to listen, download, review, subscribe to the podcast. A 5-star review would be appreciated. You can email us at flythew670@gmail.com. And don't forget, you can watch us on the Score YouTube page. All right, Crawly, it's time to round the bases and get a little Cubs news about former players and other news from around the league that's caught our attention.
Yes, sir. We talked last episode how Shota was getting no love, right? Not a finalist for the Cy Young or Rookie of the Year awards, but on Thursday night, Shota was named to the All-MLB second team. So MLB's kind of had, this is the 6th annual All-MLB team show honoring the best players from the 2024 season. The All-MLB team is it's an award given to the best players across both leagues at each position during the season. So selections to the first and second teams are determined by a mixture, Dustin, of fan vote, a panel consisting of media members, former players, and officials. If you watch the show, Roy Wood, we had him on the podcast, Roy Wood. He's a Cub fan. He was in Vegas. And Shota was named to the All-MLB second team. So that was kind of, good to see Shota getting a little bit of attention there. I know we talked about how difficult it was.
Yeah, he got a little love. We would have liked a little more, but he got a little.
Right. So that was cool. If you look at the All-MLB first team, they've just a lot of those pitchers that you take a look at there, Dustin, those were guys that we talked about earlier that we just, we understood why he wasn't a Cy Young Award nominee. Chris Sale's on there, Paul Skeens, Zach Wheeler. So 3 of the guys that are up for the Cy Young Award for the National League, and then Tariq Skubal and Corbin Burns. So basically you got all Cy Young candidates in that one. If you look at the rest of the list, Vladimir Guerrero, who I said in the earlier segment, I'd love to see him at first base for the Cub. Was in first base, Ketel Marte for second, Bobby Witt Jr. at shortstop, Jose Ramirez at third, Shohei Ohtani DH, William Contreras catching, Aaron Judge in the outfield, Samuel Juan Soto and Mookie Betts. Again, I don't think you could argue with any of those picks on that one.
No. No, there's no, I mean, yeah.
Best of the best right there. And then when you take a look at the second team, it's still pretty darn good. You got Bryce Harper at first, Jose Altuve at second, Lindor at short, Manny Machado at third, Yordan Alvarez as DH, Salvador Perez catching, Jackson Merrill, Jaron Duran, and Teoscar Hernandez in the outfield. And then the pitchers, which Shota was a part of, Seth Lugo, Dylan Cease, former White Sox, Framber Valdez, and Michael King. And, every time we said we'd kind of be looking at Framber Valdez, remember, that was who the Cubs thought they were getting in a Wilson Contreras trade, and Dusty ixnated at the last second.
Yeah.
So there he is, right?
Remember that one.
Second all team. So if the Cubs would have had him, they would have had 2 on there, right? So a little frustrating, but the cool thing, Dustin, and we've talked about this before about Shota's personality, and we talked about it with Guys in Baseball in the last episode with Evan. His personality has really come out in Chicago. And so at the end of the show, right, Roy Wood is the host, and he's a Cub fan. He sings "Go Cubs Go" with Shota. It was absolutely hilarious. If you saw the clip, it was all over YouTube. But then the thing that interested me a lot was what Paul Skeens, they kind of had like a red carpet thing, before the show started, and how everybody's dressed all fancy. Here's what Paul Skeens had to say when he was on the red carpet about Shota Imanaga.
I regret this one a little bit because Shota came up to me when we were in Pittsburgh, and he asked me how I held my fastball and not my sinker. And so I was like, yeah, here you go, dude. Like, whatever, check it out. And then he no-hit us his next outing. So I don't know if he was throwing my fastball or not. But
maybe looking back, like, the reason I had a good game was maybe that talk we had.
Yeah, I regret that one a little bit.
So, wow, Paul, Shota comes up, asks to see the grip of the fastball, and then the next time out, he blanks the Pirates. What do you think, Dustin? Maybe, hopefully Shota's asking some more questions as he walks around.
I hope so, yep.
So, a little Matt Shaw update. We've been following the Premier 12 tournament particularly closely as top Cubs prospect Matt Shaw has been playing for Team USA. The U.S. beat Team Mexico, who is the host country, 12-2 to advance to the Premier 12 Super Round beginning on November 20th. In that game against Mexico, Shaw went 1 for 3 with a bases loaded triple and a walk. So he drove in 3 runs, drew a walk, and it's just been absolutely phenomenal. So the U.S. finished group play with a record of 3-2. They were second in Group A behind Team Venezuela. Team Venezuela had a record of 4-1. So the U.S. lost, I want to say, to Puerto Rico and to Venezuela. So that's why their record was 3-2. But they're moving on. Do you know who started that game against Mexico, that 12-2 victory, Dustin?
I do not.
44-year-old Rich Hill.
Oh, Jesus.
Who wants to come back and play again next year. So let's see. We'll keep an eye on that one. But Team USA's next game will be against the top-ranked Japanese team on Thursday. I want to say 4 or 5 morning Central Time in the Tokyo Dome, where the Chicago Cubs, the big boy team, will be playing their first game of the season. But Japan was undefeated in group play. They pounded the Dominican Republic yesterday, 11-3 to open the Super Round. So it's going to be that's going to be a heck of a test, Dustin, to see how Shaw and Team USA do against Japan. I think if Rich Hill starts that one, though, I think it may not look pretty. That's just my
I think it's good. I think it's good info. I think it's good for baseball nuts to have this stuff to latch onto at this time of year.
Yeah, and again, just how does Matt Shaw compare against world-class talent? You saw in the World Baseball Classic a lot of these guys that are now, whether you're talking about Ohtani, whether you're talking about Yamamoto, Roki, all the guys that were there. I mean, it's the talent gap is getting smaller and smaller, especially when you have these teams where you have the best of the best, right? Like the best players in Japan all on one team. I think that's a much better measuring stick, as opposed if you just go to Japan and you're playing within the league. I think this is a much better because it's like the Japanese all-star team right now.
Yep, that's a good word for it. How about this story? I'm glad we're talking about it. You headlined it Fast and Furious. Chris Bryan had a Lamborghini in like a not carjacked exactly, but like espionage stuff. Like just crazy. Tell everybody the story.
Yeah, after another memorable season in miserable season in Colorado, Bryan hires a company. These are professional companies design, and he's going to have his $300,000 Lamborghini Huracan driven to his offseason home in Las Vegas, right? So it's going from Colorado to Vegas. Someone picked up the car in Colorado, but it never arrived where it was supposed to. And so investigators said hackers infiltrated the company that Bryan used to transport his car, and the vehicle was rerouted to a different location in Las Vegas. Eventually, they tracked down the vehicle and the man driving the car, and it was part of this elaborate multi-state high-end vehicle theft ring. So
yeah, there was a Texas Ranger player. I forgot the name, but there was a Texas Ranger player also had the same thing happen. All part of this, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely insane. So, I mean, I'm going to see Chris Bryant, Dustin, in approximately 5 days at the Chicago Sports Spectacular. So, hopefully,
I guess now maybe we know why he's charging so much for autographs, right?
Seriously, hopefully he's in a good mood, and yeah, because you gotta make sure that Huracan and increasing his insurance. $300,000. Oh my God, that's an expensive car.
That's just stupid. Anyway, how about Pat and Ron getting new paper from 670 The Score and the Cubs?
Yeah, congratulations. The Hall of Famer Pat Hughes, former Cubs All-Star Ron Coomer, the fantastic Cubs radio broadcast on 670 The Score. They signed a contract extension. This was reported by Jeff Agrest. He's a friend of the pod, and so this is what Jeff had to tweet out. Radio voices Pat Hughes and Ron Coomer agreed to a multi-year deal with the club last week, the Sun-Times had learned. So I'm sure that there's probably going to be some sort of rollout between the Cubs and 670 The Score. But Agrest,
well, it's news to me. I just checked my official Odyssey email, Crawly, and nothing in there about Pat and Ron getting new paper. So.
Yeah, it's take a look at Jeff Agrest. He's a Sun-Times entertainment reporter and sports reporter. So hopefully, like I said, hey, it's good. It's going to be good news because honestly, Dustin, I listen to a lot of radio broadcasts. You can listen to the broadcast of every game using the MLB app. I drive a lot to Wisconsin, so I do get to hear Bob Uecker and the call up there. It's to me, I think it's honestly one of the best broadcasts in baseball. Pat Hughes is just absolutely phenomenal. And I think that him and Ron have such a good rapport. I don't think people understand how blessed we are to have that great radio broadcast.
Yeah. If you ever question it, and if you get out in the car and hear some other ones, you would know that we are truly blessed to have those two calling Cubs games. No doubt about it.
Yeah, and I just love it. And Pat is such a great guy, and Ron, just so much knowledge. He really, like I said, I feel like they've just gelled together so well. So excited. And then, hey, Pat Hughes is going to be at the Club 400 Christmas party. So if you want to, give him a congratulatory handshake, he'll be there. So we'll have more info on that as well coming up.
Okay, more info maybe on the next pod on that one.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, that's a wrap. Don't forget to listen, download, review, and subscribe to the Fly the W podcast. Follow on all the socials. Of course, we're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You can email us, flythew670@gmail.com, and you can watch us by subscribing to the 670 The Score YouTube channel. All right, Crawly, next time we get together, we'll be able to go over all the MLB hardware that's going to passed out this week.
Yep, and we know it's not going to be any Northsiders getting it, but I got a feeling hopefully next year we'll see some Cubs winning some awards. Go Cubs! Hey guys, it's Crawly. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. If you want to see more of our videos, be sure to check out our playlist and let us know what you think in the comments below. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media to stay up to date with our latest episodes. Links are in the description. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Go Cubs!